great to be here. Thank you so much for having me. I'm grateful for the chance to share with you. I thought that I would just share a couple of stories of some experiences that I've had, and then hopefully have some time for a conversation. David Brooks wrote a book a couple of years ago called The Road to Character, and in it, he talks about the difference between resume virtues and eulogy virtues. Resume virtues are what you and I spend a lot of our time focused on. It's the bullet points we're trying to develop, and the ways in which we're trying to make a name for ourselves, achievements, accolades, honors that you might sort of secure over the course of your life. And all of us are involved with that work, and it's an important part of growth, maturity, and development. But Brooks says, life is about more than just achievement. It's also about significance. And so he encourages folks to think about not just building the resume virtues, but also the eulogy virtues. What is it that people will say about you when you're gone? What will be the character that they testify to? And how will they think about the way you live your life? I think there are 5 postures that we each should think about as a person of faith who tries to honor the Lord in our daily living. First is to keep humility at the center. Probably the great hymn to Christ that appears in Philippians chapter 2 is the best example of this. It says, if therefore there's encouragement in Christ, any consolation of love, any fellowship of the Spirit, any affection or compassion, make my joy complete by being of the same mind, maintaining the same love, united in spirit, intent on one purpose. Do not merely look out for your own personal interests, but rather for the interest of others. Have this attitude of yourself, which was also in Christ Jesus, who, although he exists in the form of God, did not regard equality with God something to be grasped, but rather he emptied himself, taking on the form of a servant. Being found in the appearance of a man, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to the point of death, even death on a cross. Therefore also God highly exalted and bestowed on him the name that's above every name, that the name of Jesus, every knee should bow, those who are in heaven, on earth, and under the earth, and every tongue should confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. This idea of Jesus emptying himself, it says in Philippians 2, the Greek word there is kenosis. This idea of a self-emptying kind of posture. It's the way of Jesus. It's what we're called to do, to be willing to sacrifice and find ways to embody humility. Taylor's a wonderful school, and I'm very honored to have my colleague Ann Elsner here from Marian University. And one of the nice things is that when you're a president, you get to know your colleagues. And it's interesting because oftentimes you're competing with some of these other institutions. And probably the institution that Taylor competes with more than any other in the country is a small school called Wheaton College in suburban Chicago. I like to refer to it as the Taylor of Illinois. And the president there is a guy named Phil Ryken. Phil's been president there for probably going on 20 years. Pastor of a church in Philadelphia. He's a Wheaton alum himself. And Phil embodies that kind of kenosis, self-emptying humility every single day. If there was any Christian college president in the country who has reason to sort of be boastful or proud or arrogant, it would be Phil. Wheaton is a highly ranked national liberal arts university. They've done a number of wonderful things. They raised a lot of money. They've been very successful, have a long legacy. And to be honest, they've been faithful for a long time. That's where Billy Graham went to school. And Phil has every reason to be proud. And yet, he is the kind of leader who, when we go on a trip for college presidents, Phil's always the guy who crawls to the very back row of the van. Phil's always the guy who carries other people's luggage. He's always the guy who's trying to say, how can I be helpful? What can I do to be a real blessing? He's an extraordinary leader who embodies that sort of humble posture, keeping humility at the center. That kenosis that Philippians 2 talks about is really important. It's the first posture I think we all ought to think about if we're going to try and lead in the way that Jesus would. Second posture is to nurture what Scripture calls a shared mind. Do I need the microphone, or what do you think, Lauren? Okay. How about, can you hear me if I talk this way? I'll try this till they get something else. I'm a professor. So, second idea is to nurture a shared mind. By that, by that, we mean, how do you have a unity of purpose? How can you try to help people to be thinking, going in the same direction? And that's actually what in Philippians 2 it says that you ought to embody, is this kind of shared mindset, a way in which you're trying to help pull things together. If you lead a team, if you lead a company, you lead an organization, that sort of importance of shared mindset is something that we're all about. We're always focused on doing. And it's interesting because I have found that goals and goal setting become one of the best ways in which you can sort of develop a shared mindset. So oftentimes when I'm working with my team, I'm blessed to be able to work with wonderful colleagues. I'm trying to say, how can we all be pointing in the same direction? A couple of years ago, my colleague Mike Calder is here. We're in the midst of a fundraising campaign. And originally when I came to Taylor, we thought that we would start a campaign for $175 million to coincide with the university's 175th anniversary. Up to that point, Taylor had never raised more than about $60 million in a campaign. So that was a big jump to go from 60 to 175. And we thought that we might be able to get there. But as we started working on the process, we just found people became unbelievably generous in ways that we did not expect. And before we'd even sort of gone public with what we were thinking, we had already raised 175 million. So we're trying to think, well, what should we do? What would the Lord want us to sort of undertake? And I remember we went to a board meeting and I was asking my trustees, what do you think is the right approach? And I really wanted there to be sort of a unity of spirit in the room. And I'll just say, there wasn't. We had lots of different ideas. And we were really weighing about, do we sort of go with what would be a big number at the time and double our original idea? Thanks, Lori. Double our original idea and go for 350 million. And I had a trustee who I deeply respect say, a double portion is a biblical idea. And so we thought, let's double 175 and let's go for 350. But I had a few trustees who said, I think you're actually making such good progress that why don't we, David, hold that for me so it doesn't be bad. Why don't you think about going for something bigger and bolder? And Mike Falder, is our Vice President for Advancement, and I had been quietly talking about a much bigger number, but we really hadn't got to a point where we were sharing that very widely. But in that meeting, I said, well, there are moments that I've wondered if we might go much bigger and try for 500 million. But that was a staggering number for us. Historically, Taylor would raise about $12 or $13 million a year. So a goal of 500 million was a crazy idea, but the Lord had really been blessing us. We decided that we would have a season of fasting and prayer, and specifically that we would put out a few fleeces. Now, I had all my colleagues give me different theologies of fleeces, and it's a good idea, bad idea. I'm not here to debate that. But we laid out 3 fleeces that we said, Lord, if you would meet these 3 things, that would be a confirmation for us that we wanted to do what we should do. And we basically gave ourselves, 4 or 5 weeks for those fleeces to come through. Because we've got a big event and we're planning on announcing the launch of the campaign. And if you're a college president, the launch of a campaign is a really big deal. It's a milestone and you really want to do it well. So you've got lots of material, lots of collateral, lots of people that come into the mix. So we're going through the process and one of the first fleeces gets met. Mike and I are sort of looking at each other thinking, oh, okay, what does this mean? And then the second fleece gets met. And we're feeling very, very encouraged. But the third fleece was waiting. And I actually went to go speak in Hong Kong, and I was going to be in Hong Kong the week before this campaign event. And I'm in Hong Kong, and we had given ourselves a deadline of a certain day, a Sunday, that we needed to meet this third fleece, that we wanted to know whether we should go. We had basically decided we're going to go for 425 or 500, which doesn't sound like a lot, but $75 million is a lot of money to swing the bat at. And we hadn't met the fleece. So I decided to call a Zoom meeting of my leadership team. And so I'm in Hong Kong, they're back here in the States, and I said, okay, guys, we laid out these 3 fleeces. We've had lots of encouraging signs, and many other things have happened, but only 2 of the 3 have been met, and we prayed for 3 fleeces. So what do you think we should do? And this particular fleece was that we were trying to reach the milestone of $275 million before we go public. And at this point, we had secured 273.
Now, we were really close. We were really close, but we weren't quite there. And so we're talking, and the chief academic officer, so this person who's in charge of the faculty and all the academic programs, our provost, said on the call, he said, a foundation reached out to me and wants to come visit the campus in late May. This is in April. They're interested in endowing a chair in Christian unity. And he said, I suppose I could call them and just see if they were interested in making the commitment sooner. Now, in fundraising, you would never do this. You would never do, because you always develop the relationship, and then you're bringing people along. And the provost has not actually met these people. They've just said that they want to come and talk with us. So we're like, I don't know. And then the other problem is that at Taylor, endowed chairs begin at 1.5 million. Well, 1.5 did not get me to 275. It got me to 274.5. So then we're debating, do we round up? What are we getting? Anyway, we decided we were going to let the provost give them a call the next morning, Monday morning, and then we reconvene Monday night just to see if anything had changed. But at this point, I'm in Hong Kong thinking we're sort of, likely not going to announce the bigger number. Anyway, then the provost realized I don't have their phone number. Like, he doesn't know them. He's only emailed them. So he emails and says, hey, I wondered if I could talk. We have an interesting opportunity, and I'm wondering if you might be interested in talking with me. And they said, sure, give us a call at 2:00. And he's like, well, I don't have your number, So they actually don't talk. So I reconvened the team Monday night, and we don't have any new news because they've not had the conversation. But the foundation said they were interested in talking with us. Now, I got to say, my whole team, we are all focused and we're all in, and we really want to be able to announce the bigger number, but we really wanted that third fleece to come in. So now it's time for me to fly from Hong Kong back to the United States. So it's now Tuesday morning in Hong Kong, Monday night back here in the States, and I get on the plane, and I decide to pay, the fee on United for me to get all the connectivity while I'm flying over the Pacific. And the provost has the call with the foundation, and he tells them about the opportunity and asks, would you be interested in making the commitment sooner so it could be included in this announcement? They'd never met him. They'd never visited our campus. They'd never made a gift to our university ever. And they said yes, and we've decided we'll give it at $2 million. I'm flying over the Pacific, and I get a text message from my provost. He says, they're in for $2 million. We got the 275. I yelled out loud. I'm like, yes! I then texted the whole team, and we announced the goal for $500 million. And as Mark said, we've gotten to 390, 395. We're really making some great progress. Having that sort of shared mindset, that's really one of the key postures that when you're leading, you have to think about. Not just keeping humility at the center, but also finding ways to nurture a shared mind. Third is that we have to experience work as worship. The Hebrew word is avodah. The Hebrew translation for avodah can mean work or worship or service. Throughout the Old Testament, there are many admonitions where you have to think about your work as a form of godly worship and also as a form of service to other people. And we need to really embody that in our own roles and responsibilities. Whatever we're doing, we want there to be a sort of alignment, a synergy of saying, how can we experience our work as worship? One of my mentors was a guy named Gary Cook. Gary was the chancellor of Dallas Baptist University. And he taught me how important it is to find something that you're really passionate about and then to sort of live into that. I never dreamed I would be a college president. Nobody as a 6-year-old says, well, I want to be a college president someday. That's just not something you think about. But it's turned out to be a wonderful alignment with my gifting, my interests, and the opportunities. And I love it. It's been a really great role. Frederick Buechner says, the place where God calls you is where two things occur, where your heart's deep gladness and the world's deep need, where those two things meet. That's your calling. Where your heart's deep gladness and the world's deep need, where the two of those things meet, that's where God is calling you. Each of us have a unique calling. It might be in sports, or it might be in politics, or it might be in a marketing company, or in starting a new technology firm, whatever it might be, there is something about you that God has uniquely wired you, given you lots of experiences, lots of mentors, lots of opportunity. Wherever it is, your heart's deep gladness. Boy, if you can find a way to serve in that opportunity and meet the world's deep need, that is the place of calling. So thinking about how it is that we can experience our work as worship, it's a great satisfaction. A fourth posture toward thinking about servant leadership is to extend loving kindness. There's so many admonitions about the Hebrew concepts of hesed, the loving kindness of the Lord, but none is more embodied than the story of Naomi and Ruth, and how Boaz demonstrated loving kindness to these two widows, and how they might actually be able to make it in the world. Back in the ancient Near East, to be a widow was almost a death sentence. You would have no way of supporting yourself, sustaining yourself. You would become a pauper. And unless there was someone who showed favor to you, oftentimes you would have a very harsh, difficult life. Naaman and Ruth understood that fully. And the loving kindness that Boaz showed to them was the same kind of loving kindness that they're pointing God demonstrates. The hesed, the way in which you sort of experience that, and the way in which you pass it on to other people. I don't know about you, but in my own life, I have been the beneficiary of lots of moments of God's hesed has come through human form. None more so than a lady we call Miss Pinky. Miss Pinky was a elementary school principal in her homeland of the Philippines. She immigrated to the United States, and as often happens when you immigrate, she didn't have her same credentials recognized in this country as she had in the Philippines, so she wasn't going to be able to be a principal, but she went to become a elementary teacher. She ended up teaching kindergarten at the preschool that was run by our church when my wife and I were living in Houston. We have one of our daughters, Elizabeth, has severe intellectual disability. If you look at Elizabeth, you think that she's a typical kid, but if you interact with her for just a few seconds, you realize that she's very special. She's now 22, but she has a cognitive development probably of a toddler. Elizabeth doesn't really have words, so she makes sounds and noises, but she doesn't communicate with words like you and I. She doesn't understand a lot of the basic cause and effect issues. So caring for Elizabeth has been quite a journey for us. When we lived in Houston, we were away from family. I was teaching at Rice, and we needed help. We desperately needed help. Parenting Elizabeth was more than a full-time job. And so I asked the pastor of our church, did he know of anybody that we could hire who could come and help us for 10, 12 hours a week to give my wife a break, and maybe we could go out for a meal every once in a while. And he said, well, there's this very special lady who we affectionately refer to around the church as Miss Pinky, and she might be able to be helpful to you. And so we met her after church one Sunday, and she wasn't sure if this was the right thing for her. We weren't sure if it was the right thing, but she said, let's give it a try. Let me come over and maybe interact with Elizabeth. At the time, Elizabeth was 6. And she said, if we've got a good connection, then I'd love to see if I could be helpful. And I will just say, day after day, week after week, month after month, I experienced the Lord's loving kindness through Miss Pinky. That woman ministered to us. She not only was extraordinary with my special needs daughter, she was extraordinary with me. She could help me to see how to be more patient with my daughter, which patience has never come easy for me. She taught me how to be loving to my wife and not get frustrated when things didn't work well with my daughter, because when you got special needs kid, things don't go well very often. She taught me how to be gentle with my daughter, and she taught me how I could bring Elizabeth not in the shadows and sort of in the back, but actually she could sit with me in the church pew. She could be part of our regular family life. Miss Pinky helped me to parent my child. Loving kindness is what I experienced from her. She really drew me into the Lord's hesed, and I saw how important it is in my own leadership to not just be a great strategist or not just have a big vision, but to actually extend loving kindness to the people on my team and to their family members. She showed me God's hesed. And a fifth posture, if we're going to be a certain leader in the world, is to extend life-giving encouragement. So often, Jesus taught us how important it is to be able to be a blessing to others. In Luke, he says, those of you who are willing to listen, this is in Luke chapter 6. I say, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you, bless those who curse you, pray for those who hurt you. Someone slaps you on the one cheek, turn to the other also. Someone demands your coat, offer them your shirt also. Bless those who curse you. That particular word, bless, in the Greek New Testament is the same word, eulogio, that we get eulogy from. It's about extending a blessing. It's about being a blessing to other people. And part of a men's group, we call ourselves the eulogists. Part of it is because all of us are in some kind of leadership position, and we recognize that so often we could get obsessed with sort of building those resume virtues, but we really want to encourage and admonish one another, to bless one another, to pursue the eulogy virtues, and to have the kind of friends that could actually give a decent eulogy at the end of our lives, that could say, here's who Michael really was, here's what his character was. And in some ways to look past our character faults or our shortcomings and to say, this is who Michael at least aspired to be. And we bless him because he's got the right aspirations. Probably each of us have experienced seasons when you've really needed a deep friend who would bless you. I certainly have experienced that over the course of my life. But I thought I might close and just tell one story about a friend who's in that group. His name is Kurt. At the time, I was serving as the president of Gordon College in Boston, and I had been in the presidency for 3 years. I was a young president. I made a very unusual move. I was a professor at Rice, and I went straight into senior administration. And because of that, I was in over my head most days. In July of 2014, Gordon was targeted by the Human Rights Campaign. At the time, they were interested in trying to see if they could bring about sort of a groundswell of change around LGBTQ rights at faith-based organizations. Gordon, like many Christian colleges, has a traditional sexual ethic for employees and for students that says, we believe sex should be reserved for marriage, and we define marriage between one man and one woman. Now in Massachusetts, that was a countercultural move because Massachusetts was the first state in the country to recognize same-sex marriages, which had happened 10 years earlier. So the HRC decided, which they're the advocacy group for the LGBTQ movement, decided that they would just try and apply pressure to see if they could get Gordon to change his position, and particularly could they get me to change Gordon's position, thinking that that would have a domino effect across the country. It was the second term of the Obama administration. Gay rights were sort of gaining purchase in lots of different sectors of society. And so they began to apply pressure. And I'll just say they're a very sophisticated advocacy group, and they knew exactly how to press on all of the essential points. They began to ask employers in the region if they would hire our graduates whom they now considered to be bigoted. Now, understand, we'd had a traditional sexual ethic in place for 100 years. Yeah. But suddenly the cultural movement had changed and they wanted to apply pressure. They began to talk to school districts and say, should you actually have student teachers from Gordon to come into your schools because, they might be discriminatory. And they began just a pressure campaign. 40% of the editorial board of the Boston Globe was gay, and so the Boston Globe ran 6 negative articles about our position over the course of about 3 weeks. And for each of those, because they didn't have a picture of the university, they ran my headshot. Wow. So I became the sort of focus of these kind of issues. Wow. And it was super intense. We had protesters on our campus. I had, threats against our family. I mean, it was a really serious business. They were very serious about it. And I decided that I needed to call our member of Congress, who I knew, but the media campaign was causing some negative issues. So I decided to call him. Now, he was a liberal Democrat, and he had been on our campus many times. Congressman Tierney, I knew him quite well. And when we had the phone conversation, I could tell he had me on speakerphone, so I assumed there were other people listening in, but I didn't know who was there. And I basically said, Congressman Tierney, what you're reading in the Globe is not representative of our university. We're a place that tries to embody the love and grace of Jesus, and you've been there, you've experienced it. And I talked for 5 or 10 minutes, and then he said, I'm going to stop you there, Mr. President. Now, I'd never been called Mr. President in my life.
Kind of good.
And he said, you need to know that my colleagues and I find your position despicable. Wow. And we have decided that you're either going to change your mind or we're going to fundamentally alter your business model. Basically, he was threatening either to prohibit students who come to Gordon to be able to receive federal student financial aid, which about 30% of our students benefited from federal student financial aid, or they were going to remove our tax exempt status so people couldn't get a tax benefit if they made a donation. Either scenario would have been very difficult for us in that situation. I'll never forget that phone call. I was sitting in my office alone. When I hung up the phone, my hand was literally shaking. Oh my gosh. And I thought, Lord, this is not what I've come to do. I'm not here to be a culture warrior. I'm here to run a university. What in the world is happening? After a couple minutes, I sort of regained my composure, and then I called my board chair, who lived in California, and his name was Kurt. And I just basically recounted the story of the phone conversation. He'd been walking alongside me for about 2 weeks as we've been going through this. And Kurt said, how are you doing? And my voice cracked. And I said, man, I'm struggling. And he said, okay, I'll be there in about 6 hours. Wow. And I said, oh, no. And he said, no, I'll be there. And literally, Kurt packed his bag and he drove to LAX and he got on the next nonstop to Boston. Wow. And he was at my house that night. And he stayed with me for 10 days, lived in my house, and he ate every meal with me because I was not eating very much. And he would sit in the corner of my office and just be present. And he'd go meet with different people and he'd be there. I had lots of people come in to yell at me and he'd be there and his face, it's not that bad, Wow.
Wow.
But he really blessed me. He really gave me that life-giving encouragement. I will remember Kurt's kindness for the rest of my life. And I hope he's the guy who gives my eulogy or I give his eulogy, because we really went through that. 5 different postures that we think about servant leadership. Keeping humility at the center, nurturing a shared mind, experiencing work as worship, extending loving kindness to others, life-giving encouragement. KNEEL. 5 postures that help us to remember the ultimate posture that we ought to embody if we're going to be a servant leader for the glory of God and the common good. Thank you very much.